Hi everyone, I'm Liz and welcome back to Elizabeth Ann Can Stitch.
Today, we're making a super simple quilted project bag, perfect for storing a cross-stitch project or any other small craft projects you have. This bag goes together so quickly and would be great to make as a gift. Let's get our supplies together. I've sized this bag to work with just a few fat quarters. One for the exterior, one for the interior, and one for the binding. You could also use scrap fabrics for your binding as you only need a few small pieces. For this bag, you will need a 20-inch handbag zipper. Technically, you could get away with a 14-inch zipper as that will be the finished width of our project bag, but I prefer to use an extra long zipper to make installation super quick and easy. I specifically recommend a handbag zipper because of the extra large zipper pull and, more importantly, the extra wide zipper tape that makes installing the zipper even easier. The last thing you'll need is quilt batting or fusible foam stabilizer to make your quilt sandwich. For today's tutorial, I will be using double-sided fusible foam by Bozell. You can find a full supply list and links to everything I'm using in the description box below this video. Let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is prep my exterior and lining fabrics for quilting. I am cutting 3 inches off of the fat quarters so they are about 15 inches wide by 22 inches long. And I will cut that same size out of the fusible foam. I am using the fusible foam today because I find that the quickest way to quilt small projects at home. You can use regular quilt batting if that's what you have on hand. You'll just need to do a little bit more prep work to baste your quilt sandwich together. I'm taking all of my pieces over to the ironing board to fuse my fabrics on both sides of the fusible foam. Since this bag is made by folding one large panel at 2 different points, I prefer to use a fabric that doesn't have a clear right or wrong direction. I like a floral or an all-over geometric print that looks good from every angle. If you want to use a fabric with a clear right or wrong direction, you may need more than a fat quarter to be able to cut your fabric in the orientation you prefer. So keep that in mind as you pick out your fabrics. Once my fabric is fused onto the foam, I can quilt my panel. For this bag, I am making a crosshatch or straight line quilt pattern onto the exterior fabric using my quilt ruler and a friction heat erasable pen. I use the 45-degree line on my ruler to get my first line placed perfectly, and then measure and mark 2-inch lines across the rest of the panel. You can use any type of quilting you want for this step, but my go-to for at-home projects is a simple crosshatch. If you want to make this bag even simpler, you could substitute a pre-quilted fabric for the main panel of this bag. If you wanted to make several bags at once, I'd quilt bigger pieces of fabric together and then cut out multiple bags at once. That's one of the reasons I think this makes an excellent bag to give as gifts. Now I'll take my quilted project bag panel back to the ironing board to remove my quilting guidelines. Now that we've completed the quilting on our project bag panel, we can cut it down to size. I am cutting my fabric panel to 14 inches wide by 21 inches long. You can modify either of these dimensions to customize your bag size, but this is what works well with fat quarters. You may notice that my finished panel includes a sliver of the selvage edge at one end because my fat quarter had quite a large selvage. But no worries, as long as it's less than 3/8 of an inch, it will be covered by my binding strips. Next up is to cut out our binding strips. You will need 2 strips that are 2 inches wide by 12.5 inches long, and 2 strips that are 2 inches wide by 14 inches long. You definitely don't need an entire fat quarter for your binding strip, so I recommend using any scraps you have in your stash. Before we begin assembling the bag, we'll do a little bit of prep work over at the ironing board for our bindings. What you want to do is fold a binding strip in half, wrong sides together, and lightly press with your fingers, just to find the center of the strip. Then fold one edge into the center and press with your iron. Repeat that for all 4 binding strips. Feel free to use any binding method you prefer on this bag, but I'm going to show you my process and techniques for getting a nice clean finish. Now we'll take everything over to the sewing machine. We're going to start by applying the zipper bindings, which are your 14-inch long binding strips that we just pressed. Grab one and lay the unfolded right side of the binding strip against the lining side of the bag. I prefer to sew my binding first to the lining and then fold over and top stitch from the right side. Sew your bindings on with about a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Repeat these steps for the other side. Now I'm going to take my bag back to the ironing board and press the binding strips up towards the edge of the quilted panel so that I can fold them over to the front for top stitching. I fold the edge of my bindings over to the front and secure in place with Wonder clips. Then I top stitch about 1/16 of an inch in from the edge of my binding strip. And my goal is that my top stitching line ends up right next to or right in the ditch of the binding from the lining side of the bag. I like to use a stiletto tool to help guide the binding in place right up against my needle, just taking my time and going slowly to make sure the top stitching looks nice and neat. Repeat these steps for the second side. Once we have both sides top stitched, we can add the zipper. Because I am right-handed, I like to install my zipper so that the head is on the left side of the bag when it's closed. I let the head of my zipper hang off the top edge of the bag about an inch, and then using my zipper foot, I top stitch the binding along the top edge onto the zipper tape using a 1/16 inch seam allowance to match the top stitching that we just did at the bottom of the binding. I recommend using a 20-inch zipper for this project, even though you technically only need a 14-inch zipper, because I find it makes the installation so much easier. And for the zippers I like to use, I find the price difference between a 14-inch zipper and a 20-inch zipper under 50 cents. So to me, I feel like it's worth it to use a longer zipper to make installation easier. Now we can attach the other side of the zipper to the bag. I like to do this by closing my zipper and lining up my binding and pinning the other half of my bag in place, lining it up against the bottom half of the bag. And I use clips to secure my zipper tape in place to the bag. I open the zipper all the way back up and then use my zipper foot to again sew the top edge of the binding into place on the zipper. You can see now why having an extra long zipper makes this step a lot easier. I like for my top stitching thread to match the fabric or zipper color I'm using, so for this bag I'm using a red thread. Once the zipper's attached, we can go ahead and press our bag into place and put the zipper where we want it to end up on the front of the bag. I'm using a ruler and measuring 2 inches from the zipper to the top edge and pressing that in place. Then I trim the zipper edge and any excess binding right up against the bag. You want to make sure once you've trimmed your zipper ends that the head of your zipper stays in the center of your bag and does not come off the zipper on either end, otherwise you'll lose your zipper head. Grab your 12-inch long binding strips and let's finish this bag. We are again going to place the right side of the unfolded binding strip up against the back side of our bag, and you want to leave at least a 1/2 inch hanging off the top and bottom edge of the bag so we can give it a nice neat finish. Pin or clip your binding strip into place and sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. We'll take this back over to the ironing board and press the binding straight up, and then repeat all of these steps for the second side of your binding. And just like that, we're on the final step, top stitching the side bindings into place. I start by folding the binding from the center and clipping it into place, working my way out from the middle to each corner. For the corners, I fold that 1/2 inch straight down over the top, making sure everything is lining up and giving a crisp 90-degree angle at the corner and clipping it securely into place. Repeat this on the other corner and maybe use a stiletto or your finger to hold everything in place while you get your stitching started. Go ahead and top stitch about 1/16 of an inch in from the edge of your binding, trying to stitch in the ditch where you just sewed your binding on the wrong side of the bag panel. Now repeat these steps for the other side binding and we'll be all done. Oh, you guys. Would this be a Liz tutorial if I didn't make a mistake in the middle of it? I just accidentally sewed my binding strip to the front of my bag instead of sewing it to the reverse. So I'm gonna unpick this
and I'll be right back.
It wouldn't be an Elizabeth Ann Can Stitch tutorial if I didn't do something wrong in my own tutorial. Okay, so I went ahead and fixed my mistake, and let's try this second side again. We're almost done.
And there we go. There is our finished project bag. There are so many different ways that you could customize or make adjustments to this to fit your needs. I think maybe in the future I will do a video showing all the different ways that you could kind of hack this. But for now, I just wanted to give you the basic tutorial and show you how easy it is to create this style of bag. So I really hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.